Hello, I want to welcome our viewers back to Conversations with John. This is a series that we've been doing where I invite leaders from across the denomination to come in and just have some conversation. Of late, we've been focusing on COVID and the pandemic, and the ground has shifted a little bit this week. And earlier in the week, George Floyd was strangled, murdered, killed by a white police officer begging for his breath, calling out to his mama. And we have seen protests erupting across the landscape, not just in Minneapolis, but around the country. And one of the leaders in the United Church of Christ, a young man of whom I have been proud so many times and who is recognized globally as a spiritual leader of many, has been central to the movement for justice there and walking those streets. And so I invite Lawrence Richardson into this conversation. Lawrence, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for this time, John.
You're welcome. And why don't you just take a moment to tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and your history and what brings you to where you are right now.
So I am a native Minnesotan, so I've lived here my entire life. I've traveled the world, however, so I'm here by choice. There's a lot of work to do, specifically in the Twin Cities, that I feel really called to do and passionate about. And I started doing that work as a teenager, having witnessed homelessness and living on the streets and seeing the pain and the desperation that there is and the need for hope, and especially among the LGBTQ community. And so a lot of my ministry started in that specific community and has since grown to include online populations and populations of different ages and ethnicities and orientations and genders. I'm also a local church pastor. I pastor Linden Hills United Church of Christ in Minneapolis. And we're an open and affirming, progressive, accessible to all, amazing, beautiful congregation that I absolutely love and adore. And they called me after me being there a series of years in many different capacities. It was mutual. I fell in love with them. They fell in love with me, but it wasn't because of any sort of ego or personality. It was about our heart and passion for justice and our mutual commitment to the church and to being the church. And so it is with a great honor and privilege that I serve as the lead pastor of that community and also have the time to do a lot of the digital and online work that I also enjoy. I've given myself the title digital evangelist, and that it gets to encompass many things, but primarily using social and digital media platforms to minister to people across the world, ministering hope, peace, love, and of course, God, and we all can be one. And I believe that the internet, especially, is a tool that the Spirit can use to connect and unite us. And so I do the work that I do because it's in me to do, and I thank God for the power and the opportunity to be a witness in this time.
So I'm going to have you back for another conversation just to talk about being a digital evangelist, because the church, which for decades has been reluctant to move into that medium, has now been overnight because of the pandemic thrust into that and is starting to wake up and realize, wow, what were we fighting this for all along? And are begging for leaders like you who can teach them to be more effective at it. But that's another conversation. However, my next question is going to refer to both your passion as a digital evangelist and your work as a prophet. I have been following you on social media platforms throughout the week as you have walked the streets of Minneapolis. Yesterday, you took a rubber bullet and swallowed some tear gas. All of that was captured on your Facebook live streaming. Tell me about what it means to walk the streets, being and bearing witness to what is unfolding, and giving yourself and other leaders in the movement for justice a voice and a platform as a digital evangelist. What's this week been like for you?
It's been a week of tremendous pride in my city and in my community. There has been lots of unrest and lots of division for a long time. And unfortunately, situations like this bring us together. And I'm proud of the way that my city has been able to come together. And I feel the collective heartbeat and pain in the collective soul when I walk down the streets, most especially the last couple of days, just seeing people at their wits' end and at the end of their rope, and all the filters are gone, and it's not necessarily a desperation or a longing or even despair. It's a resignation, and a feeling of finally just being seen, finally taking a breath, a breath that George Floyd was robbed of. And so to feel that in the streets, multiplied by hundreds and thousands of people, it is visceral for me. And then you see the destruction, the broken glass and the graffitied everything. And again, it just, in the burning buildings, like some of the buildings are still smoldering.
Right.
And new ones are being put ablaze. And so just, all of it is visual reminders as well of just how much pain there is.
So I think that's an important point, and I might ask you to speak a little more deeply about that, a sign of how much pain there is. In predominantly white communities, the burning buildings are evidence of the overreaction of the police force. It becomes, after the fact, an argument for why police have to be as violent and as abusive as they are, and ends up mitigating whatever anger white people would have about what happened to George Floyd. And yet, from the perspective of marginalized communities, whether by race or by gender or by identity, whatever it may be, when the law proves unable to hear you, to see you, to protect you, then this becomes a way of capturing the attention of those who hold power. Can you say a little bit more about what it's like to experience this from the perspective of the marginalized communities?
I can say that from my perspective, I only felt sadness about the destruction of the buildings, because it had to take that in order for these issues to really get some light. And for me to say that, it doesn't mean that I'm glorifying the destruction, nor do I condone it. I don't believe that it was just a cry for help, or it wasn't just a mechanism to get attention. I believe that it was also an act of spiritual war, and this understanding that if your very life doesn't matter to the city around you, then the city around you should not matter to your very life. And so, if we're going to be continuously destroyed, as some people might say, then what difference is there if we destroy the property around us? Because we're not going to live anyway. I don't necessarily agree with that assertion. I believe that, yes, we do need to do more than talking and praying and marching, because we've been doing that for all of time, and we're still in these situations. So I do believe that there needs to be force met with force, but I do believe that force is a spiritual force, and we need to cultivate ways for that spiritual development and spiritual edification to happen outside of the church, because the people that need it are in the streets. They're not in the church, and they weren't in the church before the pandemic. A lot of these people were marginalized from the churches that could help them, and so I think that we're seeing a lot of our systems showing us how we can strengthen the work that we do, whether it's through the church or locally or within the community. There's just a lot of things that we can do to strengthen our relationships with one another.
You have a lot of colleagues around the country, both within the United Church of Christ and wider ecumenical interfaith circles, who are probably within the next few weeks never going to set foot on the streets of Minneapolis, not out of neglect or not caring, but because of the circumstances of the pandemic that isn't allowing them to leave where they are. What would you ask of them? What would support look like for you and the movement that you're a part of from the various locations where allies are found right now?
From what I am seeing, from the basic level of food, resources for supportive housing, and healthcare, like just making sure that not only the folks on the ground, but just people in our communities that are suffering with these injustices, that they have resources and that they be better equipped to flourish. I think that that's one thing. Policy, of course, those are longer term goals, to rewrite policy and to get different elected officials in perhaps the Supreme Court and the legislative body. Those are longer term things that I believe that we all can commit to doing. And then also just, there's local businesses that are suffering, perhaps buying gift certificates to those places, perhaps food cards for the restaurants in the neighborhood. There's still a lot of homeless people, and we know that all of these things can't be fixed overnight, but if people around, the entire world does a little bit of, what they can do, then all of that will add up. And I believe that these injustices will be erased, and people will feel that things are beginning to be repaired. I will say lastly that reparations is something that people have an issue with talking about for the most part and reconciling with. And so if we change the language to perhaps call it making amends or initiating healing, then I think that might open the conversation up to people that might not otherwise have considered reparations before.
That's really important. I had a mentor who once said to me, think of reparations as a way of repairing the damage. And I've always lived with that. I'm wondering if you can take us on a visual walk. You've been on the streets in Minneapolis, walking with the justice leaders and the movement makers and the protesters and the peaceful resistors. Walk us down the street, whether it was yesterday when you became physically violated with a rubber bullet and the gas mask, and just what is it you're experiencing? What is it you're healing or hearing? What is it you're seeing? What is it you're feeling when you walk those streets?
It's like night and day on one part of the city. You look to the east or the south or the north, and there's nothing. Like there's people like sitting in their lawn, walking their dog. There's nothing. And then you look to the right, or you look or you look to the west, and there's smoke, and there are people, some walking the streets, some sweeping glass off the streets, some literally laying or sitting in the streets. The streets are lined with garbage cans, tables with food and bags, containers of bottled water, and some buildings are completely gutted. Some buildings are boarded up. Some buildings that were in the midst of construction just completely graffitied inside and out. And then the buildings that are still smoldering, there are people that are just sitting right next to them, sitting on the street, maybe talking on the cell phone or eating a slice of pizza. It's just a mix of everything. And then you continue to walk toward where there's more sound, and you hear helicopters everywhere, but where there's music, you follow the music, and the crowd gets bigger, and then there's a sound stage, and there's some, vans, and there's some police barricades, and then it becomes, thousands of people, and there's a lot more people toward the center. I walked several blocks so that I could park and then be able to be in the midst of everything without trying to figure out where I was going to put my car.
Right.
So to see the crowd just swell as I walked further toward the music, my heart would started beating faster and faster, just because I knew that that's where the action was. But I was surprised because I got to where all of the people were and the music was, and the free bratwursts and water and all of the chips and everything. And I heard something behind me. And when I say behind me, there was nobody. Well, I didn't see anybody, but there was nobody back there. People were trickling back there, but I heard something, and I don't know what I heard. But then all of a sudden, people start running toward this place behind me about 100 feet. And I ran over there, and somebody was stabbed. And then people were like, call the police. And so then now I'm standing there, and the police was called. People are rushing over to help the young man that was stabbed. It's not clear who stabbed him. And then as this was happening, a Caucasian man stumbled out into the kind of center of the block, and he was very visibly intoxicated. And so he then falls down as the three big police units come driving up, and he falls back, and they run over to him. And then everybody's yelling at the police, like, no, he's not the one that needs help, this guy over here. And so then the police, I don't know if they really registered what was happening, what was being said. It was clear that this person was in some sort of distress, and I'm assuming that's why they ran to this person. But it took them a couple of minutes to understand that the other person that needed help was laying over in the grass. And so then when they got over there, people were very upset that it had taken them so long. And then I think that stirred up things that were already bubbling. And somebody threw a water bottle into the direction of the police officers. And I was filming at the time, and I'm trying to tell people behind me, like, don't throw anything. And now the police are feeling threatened. So they're saying, get back, get back. And then several folks, several officers jump out, and they have the gear on, the riot gear and masks and everything. And some people are yelling, get back. Some people are yelling, obscenities. And then all of a sudden I see something come out into the sky, and then it was a cloud of smoke. And I was like, oh, here we go, pepper spray. And my eyes, of course, start burning, and I have to now I'm got to end my recording because clearly I need to reposition where I'm at and figure something out. And as I turned my phone off and turned around, then I got shot with a rubber bullet. And I wasn't aware that it was a rubber bullet. I just felt a sting and a really sharp pain. So I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't bleeding. And I just kind of felt around, and I was like, okay, there's no blood, I can run. So then I ran. But all of this is in a split second because, I don't want to make the wrong mistake, right? Because they're literally armed and right there behind me. And so, yeah, and I didn't leave after that. I mean, we moved back, but we wanted to make sure that the gentleman who was stabbed got help, and we wanted to bear witness to whatever happened in that situation. So we came back closer to, where we were before, and we're saying things like, hands up, don't shoot. We were chanting to show that we were, there peacefully, that we're not trying to harm anyone. And then, of course, there's always someone that you can't control. And then there was another water bottle that came over into the crowd. And then it just did that for a while until the cops got the guy in the back and then drove off. And then it's like nothing happened. They go away and the music is still playing. And
Wow.
yeah.
Mm. Well, Lawrence, I'm grateful to you for this conversation, but B, and more importantly, your ongoing ministry. You are a gift to the church. You are a gift to Minneapolis. You are a gift to your congregation. As promised, I want to give you the last word. What would you like to leave our viewers with?
Well, thank you, first of all, John, for this conversation and the opportunity to share in this space and time. And I just would like to leave with the viewers that, there is a lot of pain out there, and the Spirit is calling us to heal that pain and to repair the damage that all of our communities have suffered.
It's a powerful word to leave on. I want to thank our viewers for tuning in again to Conversations. I want to thank Lawrence for his being here with us and sharing a firsthand account of what life on the streets of Minneapolis are like, and for his being a ray of hope and sunshine in that community. We'll be back again soon. Thank you for listening.